The gallery after dark after closing. The building fell quiet until a phone's glow caught a forgotten note on the far wall. Ethan, don't turn the lights off, someone's coming tonight. The handwriting knew my name. The door knew. When to knock. Chapter 1. After Closingium Ethan, 29. Night staff in a small contemporary gallery, tucked between a bakery that opens at 4 a.m. and a bar that never really closes. At 10:01, the front door clicks, the track lights. Dim in a staggered hush, and the floor chevrons shine like they were drawn with a ruler and a vow. My job is to count what the day forgot fingerprints on plexi, scuffs near the plinth. A pencil left where a sculptor would swear they never touched a pencil. Rain started before the last visitor left. The kind that doesn't soak you so much as convince you the sky has a leak. I made my round. Fire doors latched, media room off, projector cool, desk locked, alarm panel blinking its patient red. Then my phone screen lit up in my hand, and the reflection threw a white square across. The far wall, a post-it, yellowed at the edges, typed my name in ink I recognized from nobody. Ethan. Under it, don't turn the lights off. Someone said they'd come tonight. I stood there with two ideas wrestling, protocol and wonder. Protocol says, secure the building. No exceptions. Wonder says sometimes a note is not a request but a thread, and if you pull it, you find the person who tied it. I didn't turn the lights off. I left them at the faintest setting, like breath. But the most shocking part hadn't even happened yet. The door was about to knock the way metal knocks twice, like a heart remembering itself. Chapter 2, The Visitor No Bell. Just two knuckles on steel, spaced apart like they wanted to be sure. When I opened, the world's wetness stepped in. A man, early 30s, rain balanced on his lashes, short beard, a fur-trimmed parka that belonged to a winter 2 states north. Over his shoulder, a cardboard cylinder with a plastic cap. He held it like a promise you didn't want to drop. Late, he said, breath misting. I'm Julian. No appointment, I said, but I didn't move aside or block him. I just let the air do the talking, not an appointment. He lifted the tube a little. An errand. I was asked to leave this here. By who? He shook his head, not secrecy, just fact. Didn't get a name. Water fled his coat and freckled the chevron floor. I took the tube. It was lighter than it looked, the kind of light you get from paper. A weight made a decision, not mass. The note behind me said, don't turn the lights off, which is exactly what someone writes when they want you to see something before you sleep. My hand found the desk, the cap found the thread of its own grooves. Before you open it. Julian said, can you tell me, are you Ethan? I nodded. He exhaled like a person who'd been holding his breath since the stairs. Okay, he said. Then I'm in the wrong place. And the wrong places are where the best doors are. What was inside the tube wasn't an artwork. It was a sentence written in ink and time. And it knew my initials. Chapter 3. The drawing I unrolled the craft paper on the admin table we pretend is a real desk. Two figures in black ink, one holding a lantern, the other arm outstretched into the lantern's path. The lines were exact without being precious, like the artist had practiced being honest more than they practiced being tidy. In the right corner, the initials ECEC. I said, half out loud, half to the part of me that recognizes a mirror before a face. Julian watched me watch it. Ethan Cole, he said, like he rehearsed the way my full name would sound if it learned. How to be a fact, I blinked. Lots of people have those initials? Yeah, he said, not disagreeing. And sometimes coincidence is just the world's way of seeing if you're paying attention. The drawing felt like it knew the room. The lantern's light didn't. Just far outward. It bent, as if it wanted to come back home. A draft kissed the back office door, and the top drawer slid 2 inches with the quiet care a ghost might use if it didn't want to startle anyone. Inside, a stapled index card, handwritten, steady cursive, for whoever needs to turn the lantern around. I looked at the drawing, then at the drawer, then at Julian, who had the expression of someone who expected the weird thing and respected it anyway. And that's when the phone rang, like a stage manager cueing the next scene. The voice on the line knew about the lantern and said my name like we'd already met in a different room. Chapter 4. The call unknown number. Ethan? The voice was low, not disguised so much as careful. Yes. Did you unroll the drawing? We did, I said, and watched Julian tilt his head at the we. Good, the voice said. Then listen. The work isn't the paper. The work is what you do with the light. Who is this? Names later, the voice replied. Directions. First, don't shut the gallery down tonight. When the sensor goes dark, let it. When it wakes, pay attention. Turn the lantern. That's it. The line dropped. I held the silence out between us like a new shirt to see if it would fit. You're taking that seriously? Julian asked, not mocking, just measuring. I don't know what I'm taking, I said. But I'm not turning the lights off. His mouth quirked. Sometimes you don't have to take something seriously. You just have to hear it. The building agreed in its own language. The motion sensor blinked out, then in, as if it had nodded. An alarm light in the storage room was about to start pulsing, and we would follow it the way people follow the sound that has their name in it. Chapter 5 storage. The little red dot in the corner stuttered. Not a breach. Not a threat, just a machine reminding us it could feel changes in air. The storage room had that museum smell: foam, wood, old cotton, time. Crates along the wall, a velvet draped easel, and in the back, a short wooden chest with fragile, hand stenciled on it, the paint cracked into the shape of the words. Meaning, on the rim, EC carved like someone had tried to be casual and failed. I ran my fingers over the letters like you do when you don't know if you're reading or learning. Braille for the first time. Julian didn't crowd me. Why are you here? I asked, eyes still on the chest. He answered without insulation. Because someone asked me to deliver a thing I didn't understand, and when I walked in, the air felt like it recognized me. Recognized you. He shrugged, or I recognized it. Sometimes those verbs trade places. I pried the chest with my nails. No lock, no latch. Inside, not a canvas, not a sculpture. A black notebook, edges furrowed from a decade of decisions. On the first page, in black pen, one sentence. For Ethan, when you become the person who turns the lantern toward me. Dated 5 years ago. I read it twice. The date made my scalp feel too tight, the way good weather turns into a headache you can't despise. And then the lights went out completely, like the building wanted to see if we could still see. You won't believe what we found in the dark. Not fear. Exactly something older that sometimes wears fear's coat. Chapter 6, outage. The gallery exhaled into black. The storm's hush got louder. I thumbed my phone light and the beam drew Julian into existence, like a slow photograph. Brown eyes, damp hair, the patience of someone who knows wood glue takes as long as it takes. He lifted his hand and set it in the light like the second figure in the drawing. The ink on paper and the breath in the room matched. I've heard some of the notebook sentences before, I said, which didn't make sense out loud until it did, not in this room. In my head, like an echo from the next room over. Maybe, Julian said, the echo is you. Or maybe it's me. Who are you besides a man with good timing and a parka built for Canada? 28, he said. Set designer. I build the places where stories happen, and then I leave before the actors decide which door to use. My shop is a block off Broadway, which means I'm close enough to hear a standing ovation and far enough to get real work done. We smiled in the dark like strangers who had earned it. The beam trembled a little with my pulse and steadied when I breathed. Then the back door coughed against its latch, like the pass on the other side had run out of patience. The text we were about to get would tell us to stay still, which is the hardest instruction when your bones want to run. Chapter 7. The door and the text eye checked the lock solid. Air seeped in anyway, the way it does when two pressures argue. The notebook flipped its own page as if a fan had been left on somewhere. In pencil on the margin of that page. When it arrives, don't leave. My phone purred. Unknown again. Have you turned the lantern? The voice asked. Yes, I said, understanding that answers sometimes arrive before the questions do. Then be still. If you get up, you'll miss the person you've been staying up to become. He hung up. Julian's jaw flexed, small and honest, a spark of anger that felt protective more than offended. I don't like someone else directing the scene. He said, then we rewrite it, I said. Rule 1, stay. He repeated it, and in repeating, adopted it. Stay. The building listened. Somewhere, a relay clicked like a nod. You think that's the turn? Not yet. The next confession. Would redraw the timeline. Chapter 8. The Notebook's Origin. We sat on the storage chest. The way kids sit on a trunk of costumes, they just decided are treasures. Julian put his palms on his knees, not to calm himself, but to tell the truth to his own hands. I left that notebook, he said. I didn't react with surprise. Something in me had already sorted it into the correct drawer. 5 years ago? He nodded. I'd seen a drawing at a small pop-up 2 figures and a lantern, unsigned. I wrote EC on a scrap and tucked it under the frame because that's what the signature felt like, even if it wasn't true. Back at my shop, I started sketching. Places light could hit and matter. Names that fit the rooms I didn't know yet. I wrote Ethan without knowing if it was a person or a sound. I stored the book in the gallery's chest after a friend with keys said the place could keep secrets better than I could. Who was EC to you then? I asked. A rumor, he said. A way of saying, someone will carry this light the right way when I can't. The lights came back on with a hush that felt ceremonial. The room looked the same and different, the way a lover looks after you've learned what scares them, and they've told you the name of it. Don't miss this detail. Light after dark is a choice as much as a switch. The message we received. Next had one word and a key attached to it, and keys are conversations shaped like metal. Chapter 9. The key, the phone buzzed again, but this time a text. Desk drawer, rooftop. We checked the drawer. A small metal key, taped to an index card with roof scribbled in a hurry. The rain had thinned to a mist that made the city look like someone had put a gauze veil over it and whispered, be kind. Rooftop. I said, places. Where stories happen, Julian shrugged. Let's go. We climbed the service stairs that smelled like paint and apology. The door yielded to the key with a dignified click. The night opened like a book knows how to do spine straight, pages eager. The city shivered in puddles. Steam rose from a grate like the city had to remind itself to breathe. We stood at the parapet, a step apart, the exact measured distance of stay, and almost a mathematical proof of consent. My hands found the cool stone. I didn't ask whose rooftop we were on. The answer didn't matter as much as the air did. I thought you were waiting for someone, I said. I was, he said. I just didn't have their face yet. And? Now? Now I have a direction, he said. Which turns out to be a person. I didn't move closer. He didn't either. There are nights where the right gesture is not a step, but a breath that doesn't apologize for being audible. When we went back down, someone waited near the front, just not the someone you think. The note's author wasn't the caller. She was the accomplice. Chapter 10. The editor, Marta, stood in the front room with a paper cup and the look of a person who likes rules but likes good stories more. She handles our catalogs with a boxer's grace. I know, she said before I could scold her for being there after hours. The door was open because the universe said please. You wrote the note, I said, holding it up. I did, she confessed cheerfully. Because Julian came by last week at noon, left a notebook, and said a thing that scared me in the best way. Give this to Ethan at night. So I scheduled a surprise the way you schedule a dentist appointment, specific, unavoidable. The calls? I asked. Not me, she said. Wrong voice. But I knew about the rooftop key. Julian didn't look embarrassed. He looked like someone whose plan had involved luck and courage in equal parts. Am I fired? Marta asked, half joking. Promoted to co-conspirator, I said. You think we were done? We weren't. The building had one more practical test. Water end time. A leak in the ceiling can ruin an exhibit or prove who you are when nobody's. Watching Chapter 11, the leak somewhere above the media room, the storm had found a seam in the roof. A dark stain spread slow as a decision. A drip plinked into a puddle the size of embarrassment. This is where art and weather make enemies and galleries earn their keep. We moved like a team we hadn't rehearsed being. I hauled tarps and plastic. Marta fetched foam wedges. Julian built a temporary tent with 2 pedestals and the kind of knot that knows it will be untied with gratitude. I slid the lantern drawing into a dry corner, my own body between it and the air that didn't care about art's feelings. Here, Julian said, and handed me a roll of blue tape like a relay baton. Here, Marta said, and passed me a towel. She'd already made warm with her hands. We worked until the plink stopped in the stain. Decided to be a map instead of a threat. My heart settled in that clean way it does when the emergency is over and you get to feel your arms again. Good crew, Marta said, sipping her paper cup coffee like it was a toast. Good storm, Julian added, and he wasn't wrong. Some weather shows you the shape of a room. Some shows you the shape of your people. Then the phone rang for the last time, and the voice finally handed us a name. The caller wasn't a stranger. It was a signature we hadn't learned to pronounce yet. Chapter 12. The signature. Ethan, the voice said. Thank you for not turning the lights off. Who are you? I asked. Eli Conrad, he said. Once upon a time, people. Thought EC meant me, I let them. Sometimes meaning is borrowed. Sometimes it's earned. Julian's eyebrows did a small dance. Eli Conrad is one of those names that curators say like they're taking an Oathwall text residencies, a series called Torchbearers that turn light into confession. The drawing? I asked. Mine? He said simply. But initials are promiscuous, Ethan. They stick to things that deserve them. If EC fits you tonight, use it. That is what a lineage is, a willingness to be more than yourself and more yourself at once. Why the key? The note, the calls. Because the work isn't the ink, he said. It's the turn. Art is a room where somebody finally turns the light towards someone else. I wanted to see if the room would do its job when nobody was there to clap. He paused. I realized I was holding my breath. Consider yourself clapped for, he added. And hung up, which is as generous an ending as any. We stood in the quiet that followed the praise. It wasn't fireworks. It was a blanket. You might think that was the curtain. It wasn't. We still had to decide what to do when the audience is just 2 people in a city that pretends it's asleep. The next scene wasn't dramatic, just honest. And that made it braver. Chapter 13, the table after Marta left, taking with her the specific energy of an accomplice who knows when to exit. Julian and I sat at the gallery's tiny kitchen table. 1 bulb. 2 chairs. The drawing between us like a map folded to the right square. When I drew this face years ago, Julian said, tracing the lantern bearer's cheek with the tip of his finger a millimeter above the paper, I didn't know which way it should look. And when I looked at it tonight, I said, I didn't know what sentence it needed. What sentence does it need? He asked. Stay, I said. The word landed like a glass that didn't spill. He nodded once, like consent, like promise, like the kind of agreement that doesn't need a contract because both parties already memorized the terms. There's an easy version of this story that ends here. Ours kept walking. Staying is a verb you have to conjugate in the morning too. Chapter 14. Night walk power flickered, then held. We locked the front door and took the long way to the back pass. The window that reflects you as you look, if you weren't worried about how you look. The alley smelled like range cheap. Perfume. We took 10 steps in the kind of silence that feels like tuning rather than absence. On a set once, Julian said, a wall fell. Nobody got hurt, but I held the frame on instinct, and it made me realize how much I only trust the World when I can touch the thing that's supposed to hold. Did you build it wrong? I asked. No, he said. I just learned that right can still fall sometimes. Since then, I checked the screws twice and the people 3 times. We reached the corner where the bakery's ovens exhale at night. Heat found our faces and took the edge off. I wanted to say more. I let the want be enough. By the time we circled back, the gallery had returned to counting its breaths. Morning wasn't far. There was one more practical decision to make, shaped like 2 small pieces of metal. Chapter 15 keys at the hardware store on the corner. The guy with the permanent pencil behind his ear cut 2 keys without asking why. He slid them on the counter with a ring that had once advertised a plumber. I paid cash like we were in a movie about discretion. On the back steps behind the gallery, where paint peels and makes continents out of time, I put 1 key in Julian's palm. Not for emergencies, I said. For everything. He didn't say anything like a speech. He pressed my hand around the ring until the teeth bit little crescents I would find later and smile at. Okay, he said. And there's a way men say okay that means yes, and thank you, and I know what you're giving me. And I'm not going to treat it like a spare. We didn't declare anything. We planned breakfast like people who know hunger. Is a love language too. There was, however, one more person to call because stories that involve mothers always require an honest clock. The smallest call can be the loudest. Chapter 16. Mom, I called. My mother the way you knock before opening your own front door out of respect, not fear. I'm fine, I said, and meant it. And I slept last night. She exhaled the way people do when a prayer unknots. I'll visit soon, she said, cautious. I'll measure soon this time. I promised. When I hung up, Julian didn't say good job. He handed me a mug. Coffee? Always, I said, and some mornings. That one word is a vow. Sun lifted the city by its chin. We had one last thing to name. Names don't trap things when you choose them together. Chapter 17. Name we walk to the roof again. Because they deserve the same view night got. The puddles had turned from mirrors into blue. The lantern drawing waited downstairs. But the lantern itself was here. In the way the light remembered us even when we weren't looking. What do we call this? I asked. Whatever you want to keep, he said. Home, I answered. He said it back, as if testing the weight in his mouth, and finding it matched his hands. Our shoulders touched gentle, not a claim, a coordinate. We didn't move away. If anyone asks how a note became a night became a life, I'll give them the short version because I like long stories and short truths. Someone told me not to turn the lights off. I didn't. Someone arrived who knew how. To hold a tube and a room and a silence. We turned the lantern toward each other. Then we kept it there. Not the end, just the beginning.